Okay, so now our hide is brained for the first time. We're actually going to brain 3 times, just because, you know, the hide is going to be stretched in a few different ways every time, and the brains are going to penetrate deeper every time. And you know, it's not a hard rule. It just kind of depends on the nature of your hide and how well you worked it before. You know, hide tanning is kind of this incremental process where the better job you do in the beginning, the easier it gets afterwards, and the worse job that you know in the beginning, the harder it gets afterwards. And so, you know, that's why I think I've been encouraging you to do it right from the get-go. And also, you know, I think I've mentioned that I've used just straight water, which doesn't clean the mucus as well as if you use lye. But like I said earlier, using lye, I'm just not into it. It's just hard to dispose of in a good way, in my opinion, at least where I'm at. And so, you know, using straight water requires maybe 1 extra braining than if you used lye. But that's okay. You know, it may take an extra hour of work, but I can feel good about what I'm doing. And so, you know, 3 brainings is what we're going to do. And in order to do those 3 brainings, we're going to have to return the hide to, you know, a perfect moisture state, which is just barely moist. And because it's kind of like a sponge, you know, if a sponge is already full of liquid, it's not going to absorb anymore. If it's completely dry, it's not going to absorb any liquid either. And so you need to be just slightly moist, and that's when it absorbs most of the liquid. And so the next part then is going to be wringing the hide as well as possible. And so here I have my wringing beam, which is just kind of a long stick that's as smooth as possible. You know, you don't want any pokey things that are going to tear holes in your hide. And you know, it doesn't need to be perfect. You know, there's little knobs and stuff, but I was just gonna rub them with something just so that you know, they're not pokey or sharp or anything. So you need to be able to rub your hands all over, and your hide will be safe this way. I've pretty much just tied this stick down to these 2 trees, and I'm also going to use a handle, you know, an axe handle, or this is a shovel handle, I believe, you know, is going to be used. And I'm going to show you how to loop the hides around those 2 sticks, and just going to give you the maximum leverage to just squeeze as much moisture out of your hide as possible. And you know, I forgot to mention before, but all kinds of bugs really love brains, of course, you know, including wasps and hornets and all that kind of stuff. And so you first got to be careful when you work your hides, not to be stung, of course. And then if you leave your bucket unattended, make sure to cover it, because they will just drown into it. And if they're not dead by the time you come back and you just put your hands in there, they will just bite you or sting you, and that can be pretty painful. So make sure to keep your working area as covered as possible. And so here I'm going to pull out my hide, and you're going to want to keep as much of the brain mixture as possible, because we're going to reuse it for the next brainings. And so first, it's pretty handy to just do a good wringing by hand, just like this. And just collect the mixture back into the brain, into the bucket, I mean. Okay, and then once you've done that, you can open it up. and you want the butt end of it. So that's probably my neck. It's a little thicker and a little more narrow. And then my butt end is right there. And let's see, you want to put the butt end on your beam, just so that you just, well, I'll show you this way, I guess. Just so there's a couple of inches. Make sure it doesn't touch the dirt. It's not a good thing at this point. So the butt end of it, so that is a couple of inches just hanging down. And you want the inside of the hide, which can always stay out. It's gonna have this more fluffy texture, and often, you know, you have knife marks and stuff on this side, whereas the grain side, you see scars often from deer going through fences and stuff and hurting themselves, and also it's a lot smoother texture as well. So, you know, the grain side right now is on the outside, and the inside of the hide is towards you. And you'll see that when I make my little loop, so I just flip the hide on top of the butt end, and I open it up as wide as possible and smooth it out. If I have holes, I want to kind of make it so that the hole is not stretched out, because it may stretch it out more. So just gonna keep it together. And so you want it that way, so that, you know, that's kind of a natural way for moisture to flow from the inside of the hide to the outside of the hide. And then you start from one end and you're gonna roll it up pretty much as tight as you can, because you're not gonna want a lot of kind of space for the hide to, I can't find the words right now as I'm battling the yellow jackets. But yeah, you just want the hides to be rolled up as tight as possible, and you're gonna reach a point where, you know, the bottom is gonna want to be rolled up too, and you're just gonna do the same things that you roll up the bottom as tight as possible. And just go up the side, tightening it. Just gonna keep on moving forward until you're about halfway. If you have any loose ends on your hide, sometimes, you know, get some weird cut and stuff, make sure to put them inside your furl there. You can start on the opposite end, again, just as tight as possible. In the meantime, it's probably better to cover your brains too, as all kinds of insects trying to get in. roll it up so that you have two kind of equal sized loops. And definitely want where they meet to be as tight as possible. Okay, so that's pretty good. See, they just meet together like this. And now you're gonna take your handle and loop it through, and then while pressing down, you're gonna start twisting it. And again, be careful with yellow jackets. You know, they like to just be hanging out. So when you put your hands on your handle on your hide, just gotta be mindful about that. And you don't want to be too fast. If you go too fast, the water doesn't wring out as good. And so just turn it a little bit, still putting some pressure down. Gonna let the water be squeezed out of it. Again, make sure to get all the drippings back into your bucket. And you notice that if you've done everything right so far, probably won't be able to see it, but there's little bubbles that come out. You know, you get air coming through the hide. And so that means that all the mucus was removed and that your hide is nice and open. So that's what you want. And when you get towards the top, you know, still you want it to be as tight as possible. So you gotta maintain as much pressure down as possible so that it doesn't kind of climb up on your pole too fast. And depending on the kind of hide that you have, the pressure that you can put at this point varies a little bit. So if you have a very thick buckskin, buck hide, you can put all your body weight into it and you will not tear it unless there was already a tear in the hide to start with. But you can really lean into it. And again, do that slowly so that the water has time to escape. But if you have kind of thinner hides, like doe skins, you don't want to put all your body weight into it because it can rip it. And so usually when I work with the doe skin, I just work with the power of my arms alone. So I don't put my body into it, I just squeeze it as much as I can with just my arms. Like this, pretty much. But for a buck, you can just put a lot more pressure into it. And again, a lot of people at this point are tempted to just take shortcuts and call it good enough. But really, how good your hide is going to be at the end is very dependent on this process of just squeezing as much water from it as possible in the first place until it's just barely damp, and then braining it again, and then repeating. So I really encourage you not to skip on this process. So here you can see I put quite a bit of my body weight into it. But if you just rest for a minute until it's done dripping, then in general you can push a little harder afterwards. So when you're gonna let this plane go, try to push it a little more here if I can. Okay, so we're getting pretty much to the limit of it. The hide is all bunched up on top. And there's still some water coming out. Okay, and at this point, when you can't go any further, you can just squeeze the hide. Again, being careful of yellow jackets. Just squeezing it should push a little more water out even. Okay, so that's pretty much it from then. And then you can unwind it. Oops, being careful, sometimes it just flips back. Okay, and so, oops, I'm just gonna show you before twisting it again. So you see that this part should be a lot darker now. So all the water has been squeegeed out of this dark part, and that's what you want. But you see that not all parts of the hide has been squeezed evenly. So, you know, this is white and wet, and this is tarnish and dry. And so in order to get it wrung somewhat evenly, you know, not everything will be perfect at the end, but in order to wring it out evenly, we're going to do this wringing process pretty much 8 times. And so right now, you know, I just took it and twisted it clockwise. Now, still in this position, I'm going to twist it counterclockwise, doing exactly the same thing. And of course, less water is going to come out this time. You know, and as you progress through the wringing, less and less water will come out. But still, it's pretty amazing how just a couple of drops of water in the end will make out a big difference in how dry your hide is. And so I'm not going to let you stand here all day kind of watching me doing that. But, you know, that's pretty much the process. Oh, well, actually, I'll show you to make it clear. So, you know, I'll do the whole thing counterclockwise, like I did clockwise. And wring it, oops, wring it out as good as possible. And then once it's done, you take the hide, you know, about halfway in the back there, and you move it a quarter turn on top of your beam, so that the part that was the driest, you know, now becomes on top, which is the part that gets the least wring out, and the part that's still wet will be in the middle, will be most wrung out. And so, you know, you just moved your hide a quarter turn towards the camera there, and then you start again. You wring it clockwise till the water is gone, wring it counterclockwise until all the water is gone. Then open it up and do the same thing. Move it a quarter turn clockwise, counterclockwise, and then the last time clockwise, counterclockwise, and then you're done. And so I'm going to keep on doing my wringing process here, and then I'll get back to you and show you what to do next. Okay, so this is my last of the wringing, this braining. And so now you're going to want to unroll it, and if you've done a good job wringing it, it's pretty tough to do because all the hide is gets crunched up onto itself, and so I just kind of go around and just kind of pull out, unfurling the hide as I go. So again, you see that the edges are really dark, which means that the fibers are packed tight. But then when you open them up, they turn white, which means that they're stretching, which is what we want. That will give you really strong hands doing this. Okay, and then you go to where the hides overlapped and just peel that off. That's all opening. All right, so now we'll move to, well, I guess I'll show you here if you can. So there's 3 different colors. Let me see if there's a better example. Yeah. So 3 different colors on the hide. The wet parts are kind of bluish, and the tight parts are tawnish. And then when you stretch them, when they're dry, they turn white. So like here, it's a good example actually. So I don't know if you'll make the difference between the bluish and the totally white, but so, if you have a lot of blue parts, if a big section of your hide is still blue and wet, you kind of have to start over. That was not a good wringing job. You want most of your hide to be this tawnish color, which means that it's dry enough and it needs to be stretched, and then once we're going to stretch it, everything will turn white. And so we're going to move to the next beam there, and I'll show you how to open it up some more. Alright, so the next beam is just pretty much either a pole that you dig into the ground firmly, or this was just a tree that was dead, and I just cut it about belly button height to give you the maximum leverage, and about that big across. It doesn't need to be huge, and you just cut it at a bevel, so two 45-degree angles, and then it just ends as a ridge in the middle here. You don't want it sharp, you don't want sharp corner, you want them blunt, so that again you don't hurt your hide. And the purpose of this is to give you a lot of leverage as you stretch your hide. Like as you've just seen, it's pretty difficult to unfurl the hide just with your hands. And so, of course you can do it by hand and just really give it a good stretch, but that's just gonna take you a lot of strength. And so this gives you leverage in that you can just, hold firmly the hide and then just roll the hide over. And that would just stretch out your hide with a minimum effort. And so here, well, I'll show you a corner actually. So you see all this edge here is really brown. And so, I'm gonna unfurl it a little bit more. And then I just really pass it over the edge and roll it more. And then I'll just work the edge here over the bevel. And it's really important to just pull your edges open, because those tend not to turn out as well, because they're often forgotten about. But you see, I turned something that was completely brown like this into something that's completely white and open. And it's easier to see the transformation from the flesh side. It starts to feel soft. You can tell there's some brains in there. If you look at the grain side, it doesn't turn quite as white. It turns white, but not quite as readily as the other side. So if you work from the flesh side, you can really tell, like here you can tell it needs to be opened up. So you just go over it and open everything up. And again, this takes a little time, but it's definitely time well spent, because the next step after this whole hide is done, it's being opened, is that all the brains that you took in your bucket from the wringing, heat that up again and get until it's just a perfect bath temperature, not too hot, but the warmer it is, as long as you can stand it yourself, will be better for the hide. And you'll see that this time your hide will be such at a perfect state that it will soak up the brains really fast. And so it's not going to be like the first time around when, you know, we put this dried hide in a bucket and we had to wait a while for it to absorb the liquid. Like this time it's going to be instantaneous. And then you can jump right away to the washing machine action, really working the brains actively into it for about 15-20 minutes. And then once that's done, we're going to be wringing it at the wringing beam again and expel the water out of the hide. And then we'll do this again, open it up until, you know, the whole hide turns white and open like this. And then again, I'm gonna warm up the brain to perfect bath temperature. And then I'm just gonna let the hide soak overnight in it. If you get started early in the morning, like really early in the morning, you may be able to get away with braining the hide and softening it in the same day. But it would be a very long day. It's possible, but it needs to be pretty warm and dry outside. And it's a lot of hard work for one day. And so what I do, you know, the whole braining process, one cycle of the braining process takes about an hour or so, maybe a little longer if you're not used to it. And so, you know, if you do 3 brainings, that's 3 hours that you've spent just braining the hide. And then it could take another, you know, 4 or 5 hours actually softening the hide. And then if you're not done that night, you know, if you decide to do everything, the softening in the same day, if you're not done at night, then you're taking a big risk of your hide drying overnight and then having to start all over again the next day. And so either you're doing that and you have to start over the next day, or you're going to spend a long night just working it until your hide is done. And you never quite know when that's going to happen, you know, once the sun disappears and moisture content of the air increases and all that. And so what I do now is that, you know, around midday on the first day, I just start braining my hides so that, you know, towards evening time I'm done with my second braining cycle, and then I just soak it back in the brains overnight and just let it sit there the whole night. You know, and if you could find a cool location so that, it's never happened to me really, but you know, you don't necessarily want the brains to go foul overnight if it's way too warm, you know, like if you live in the south and it's like 100 degrees outside even at night, you know, that may kind of be the problem. So, you know, if you can find a cool space for it to let the hide hang in the brains overnight, that's better. And then tomorrow morning, first thing after breakfast, I'll just do the last stringing, and then I'll open it up again like this, and then we'll be ready to soften. So, you know, I still have a little work to be done on this part here, but otherwise I've opened the hide really well here. It's very flexible, it's very soft at this point. And so that's what we want, you know. Once I'm done turning all of this into all of this, then I'll be ready to go back in the brains, and then I'll be in good shape.